The days after that walk blurred into each other. But the feeling didn't fade. It sharpened. I started measuring time by the moments I wasn't with my wife, by the excuses I rehearsed before speaking them out loud. I told myself I was being careful, that nothing had actually happened. But the truth sat quietly underneath every thought. I was already divided. My wife noticed the change before I did. She asked if I was tired, if the stress was getting to me. I said yes because it was easier than explaining the other weight pressing on my chest. She reached for my hand once, squeezing it gently, and the touch felt unfamiliar, like something borrowed. Guilt followed immediately, thick and sour, but it didn't stop me from thinking about him later that night, replaying the sound of his voice, the way he listened as if every word mattered. I began finding reasons to pass by the harbor. Sometimes I didn't even see him. I just stood there watching the water, letting the possibility settle in my bones. When I did see him, it was never planned. Or at least that's what I told myself. A brief conversation. A shared cigarette. A look held for a second too long. Nothing obvious. Everything dangerous. He never pushed. That was the worst part. He spoke to me like someone who already knew the answer and didn't need to ask the question. He talked about his life, the loneliness he didn't dress up with jokes, the relationships that never quite fit. When he said he tried to want differently, his voice didn't break, but something in me did. I recognized that effort. I had lived it at a home. The distance between my wife and me grew quieter, more polite. We slept facing opposite sides of the bed, our backs a careful agreement. She trusted me enough not to question where my thoughts went when I was silent. That trust made everything worse. I wasn't just betraying her body. I was betraying her belief in me. One evening, while she was in the shower, my phone lit up with his name. I didn't answer. I watched it vibrate until the screen went dark, my heart pounding like I'd been caught doing something wrong, even though no one was watching. Later, I told myself I'd done the right thing, that ignoring him was proof of control. But control didn't stop me from wondering what he wanted to say, or from feeling disappointed that he hadn't tried again. The realization came slowly, painfully clear. I wasn't choosing between two people. I was choosing between the version of myself I had built to survive and the one I had buried to be accepted. That knowledge didn't feel noble. Felt selfish. Because every step toward him was a step away from the life I had promised to protect. When he finally spoke the truth out loud, it wasn't dramatic. He said he could feel me pulling away and closer at the same time. He said it hurt to watch. I wanted to apologize. Instead, I stayed quiet. Silence had always been my weapon and my shield. He told me he wouldn't ask me to leave my wife, that whatever happened had to be something I chose freely. His restraint made the choice heavier, not lighter. That night, lying awake again, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. Infidelity doesn't begin with touch. It begins the moment honesty becomes selective. I was already editing myself, already protecting one truth by sacrificing another. And as the sound of the waves drifted through the open window, I knew I was standing at the edge of something irreversible, pretending I hadn't already leaned forward. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It settled into me slowly, like a tide that keeps rising no matter how many times you tell yourself it will stop. I woke up one morning with the strange calm that comes when your mind has already made a decision your heart is still afraid to name. The waiting, the circling, the pretending that I could stay suspended between two lives. It had all run its course. I went through the motions of the day with careful attention, noticing details I usually ignored. The way my spouse moved through familiar spaces with ease. The quiet trust in their voice when they spoke to me. The life we had built wasn't false. That was what made this unbearable. It was real, solid, and kind. And yet, it was no longer enough to hold all of me. When I was alone, I thought about him. Not with urgency or desperation, but with clarity. I thought about how he had asked for honesty instead of promises. How he had drawn a line not to pressure me, but to protect himself. I understood then that the choice in front of me wasn't between two people. It was between continuing a life built on partial truth or risking everything to live fully, whatever that might cost. I met him one last time before I planned to leave town. I told myself it was for closure, for finality. We both knew that was only half true. There was a quiet intensity in the way we spoke, as if we were aware that this conversation would shape whatever came next. I didn't touch him. I didn't need to. The intimacy was already there, woven into every word that I told him. I was scared. That naming what I felt meant dismantling everything I had carefully constructed. He listened without interrupting, without trying to rescue me from my fear. When I finished, he said something that stayed with me long after. He said that loving someone shouldn't require erasing yourself. That choosing safety over truth eventually turns safety into a cage. Those words followed me home. They echoed in the quiet spaces between conversations, in the pauses where my spouse waited for me to say something I didn't yet know how to say. I became acutely aware of how much I had been shrinking myself to fit into a life that no longer matched who I was. That awareness hurt, but it also felt strangely freeing. That evening, my spouse asked me if I was happy. The question mirrored his so closely it felt like fate mocking me. I looked at the person who had shared my life, my bed, my history. I saw care and effort and a love that had never tried to hurt me. And I realized that staying silent now would be the deepest betrayal of all. Not because of what I had done, but because of what I was continuing to deny. That I didn't confess everything. Not yet. But I didn't lie either. I told them I was lost. That I didn't feel like myself anymore. That something inside me had shifted and I didn't know how to put it back. The pain in their eyes was immediate and devastating. I understood then that truth, even partial, carries consequences you can't take back. That night, I packed my things slowly, deliberately. Not as an escape, but as an acknowledgement that things could not continue as they were. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that staying without honesty would destroy us both. Leaving was the first real act of responsibility I had taken in a long time. Before I left town, I sent him a message. I told him I wasn't ready with answers, but I was ready to stop pretending. That whatever happened next would be rooted in truth, not fear. He didn't reply right away. When he finally did, it was brief and steady. He said he would be there, but only if I came as my whole self. As I drove away, the shore faded from view, but its meaning stayed with me. It wasn't a place anymore. It was a boundary. Between who I had been and who I might become. Between comfort and courage. Between loyalty built on silence and love built on truth. I didn't know how this story would end. I only knew that I had reached the point of no return. Infidelity had cracked my life open. Not because of desire alone, but because it forced me to confront the cost of denying myself for too long. Whatever waited for me beyond this moment would be difficult, painful, and uncertain. But for the first time in years, it would be honest.